Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava. Here, get those. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunjabi. And Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari. Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari. Yashodanandanam Brajajana Ranjana. Yashodanandanam Brajajana Ranjana. Yamunatira Vanachari. Yamunatira Vanachari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jai Om Vishnupad Paramahansa Rudikacharya Ashtottara Tata Sri Srimad His Divine Grace Srila C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada Ki Jai. ISKCON BBT Founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Jai Om Vishnupad Paramahansa Rudikacharya Ashtottara Tata Sri Srimad His Divine Grace Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur Ki Jai. Ananta Koti Vaishnavana Ki Jai. Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai. Grantara srimadbhagavatam Ki Jai. The Samaveda Bhaktivinoda Ki Jai. All glory to the Assam devotees. All glory to the Assam devotees. All glory to the Assam devotees. All glory to Shri Guru and Gauranga. On this 18th day of May 2020 in SanDiego, we're reading from the book containing all of the samadhis. This is the little bios of the great devotees. That's what we'll read first, and we'll read the Srimad Bhagavatam. So today is the appearance day of Srila Vrindavan Das Thakur. In her childhood, Narayani Devi, the niece of Shiva's Pandit, became mad with love of God upon receiving the mercy of Sri Gauranga Mahaprabhu. Later, she gave birth to Vrindavan Das, who was the last disciple of Sri Nityananda Prabhu. On his guru's order, he wrote Sri Chaitanya Bhagavat. It is practically a law among Vaishnava writers that Sri Rupa Goswami, like Sri Rupa Goswami, Sanatana Goswami, Krishnadas Kaviraj, and Vrindavan Das Thakur, to always keep themselves in the background. They never mention anything about their family lineage or personal history. The authors of the best written and most relishable verses collected in Sri Rupa Goswami's Padyavali remain unknown. During the 16th century, entire books of exceptional transcendental prose and poetry were penned by prideless Vaishnavas preferring to remain anonymous. Feeling utmost humility, such Vaishnava writers express themselves only in relation to their preceptors. Krishnadas Kaviraj glorifies his gurus at the end of each chapter of Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita. Sri Rupa Raghunath Pade Yar Ash Chaitanya Charitamrita Kahe Krishna Das, praying at the lotus feet of Sri Rupa and Sri Raghunath, always desiring their mercy, I, Krishna Das, narrate Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita, following in their footsteps. Srila Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami shows his supreme homage and gratitude by honoring Vrindavan Das Thakur with the appellation Vyas in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, Antya 2082. VrindavanaDasaThakura is Lord Nityananda's favorite devotee, and therefore he is the original Vyasadeva in describing the pastimes of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Close quote. As Srila Vyasadeva told Sri Krishna's pastimes in Bhagavatam and other Puranas, Srila VrindavanaDasaThakura described Chaitanya Leela in the Chaitanya Bhagavat. The humble heart of Krishnadas Kaviraj pours out more praises of VrindavanaDasaThakura. Quote, hearing the Chaitanya Bhagavat, of course he called it Chaitanya Mangal, it was later renamed because it was already a book by that name, by Lochan Das. So he called it Chaitanya Bhagavat. Hearing Chaitanya Bhagavat destroys all misfortune. By reading the Chaitanya Bhagavat, one will understand the glories of Lord Chaitanya and Lord Nityananda. And he will attain the highest perfection of knowledge, pure love of Krishna. Since such a wonderful book could not be written by a human being, it seems that Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu himself has spoken it through the mouth of Srila VrindavanaDasaThakura. I offer millions of respectful obeisances to the lotus feet of VrindavanaDasaThakura. By compiling such a valuable book, he has delivered everyone from the cycle of birth and death. CC Adi 8:33-42. At Mam Gachi in Moda Drumadweep, Navadweep, VrindavanaDasaThakura established deities of Nitai Gauranga and Sri Jagannath Dev. He lived there as a celibate and worshipped his beloved deities. VrindavanaDasaThakura had many disciples, including Gopinath Brahmachari, a descendant of Sri Keshava Bharati. In Krishna's pastimes, VrindavanaDasaThakura is Srila Vyasadeva. His samadhi is in the 64 samadhis area. Now, give me some input here. I forgot to cue up this, but how about if I read the Nityananda real quick? This is a nice poem by his, and I put it into an English poem. So give me a second here to cue this up. Okay. No, it's not included in there. No. Okay. I don't know why this isn't coming up. Okay. This will take me about 15 more seconds. Okay. Well, take me another few seconds. Okay, that should do it. Okay, here we go. I'll give you the first verse in Sanskrit, and then I'll just read the English. Sarat Chandra Brantim Spudalamalkantim Gajakatim Hari Premon Mattam Tatapadamasattvam Smitamukham Sada Gunan Netram Kalakalita Vetram Kalibadam Bhaje Nityanandam Bhajanata Dukandam Niravadi. Beside the splendor of his golden form and smiling face, the splendor of the autumn moon appears most commonplace. Because he's mad with love of God, though he's God in disguise, he walks just like a drunken elephant and rolls his eyes. The coward's rod he carries is his weapon to destroy whatever ills and evils wicked Kali can deploy. O friends entrapped in Kali's clutches, yearning to break free, just worship Nityananda Ram, the root of the bhakti tree. Unequaled in his love for Krishna, he's a vast abode of transcendental mellows only God has ever showed. For all his devotees, he's everything, and for his wives, Shri Vasudha and Janava, he is their very lives. Since love for Krishna makes him mad, his actions may seem odd, and so the foolish fail to see that he himself is God. O friends entrapped in Kali's clutches, yearning to break free, just worship Nityananda Ram, the root of the bhakti tree. Most dear to Shachi's son, he is a reservoir of bliss. Throughout the universe, he's worshipped with great happiness. Impelled by deep compassion when he sees the state therein, he saves the people sinking fast in Kali's sea of sin by teaching them to chant the holy name with every breath, thus crushing the conceit of Durga's sea of birth and death. O friends entrapped in Kali's clutches, yearning to break free, just worship Nityananda Ram, the root of the bhakti tree. He said, O brother, that brother is Lord Chaitanya. He said, O brother, Kali's now ascendant everywhere, increasing people's suffering. It's more than I can bear. Please give these fallen souls an easy process to attain the shelter of your lotus feet, the place beyond all pain. Instruct them all to chant Shri Krishna's name, the Lord replied, to worship him with love and by his teachings to abide. O friends entrapped in Kali's clutches yearning to break free, just worship Nityananda Ram, the root of the bhakti tree. Now he's addressing all the people he's going preaching with Haridas. O brother, kindly chant Shri Krishna's name incessantly, and also teach this process to your friends and family. Thus cross the sea of birth and death, and be supremely blessed. Your liberation is the only alms that I request. Entreating thus to save the people from illusion's thrall, with arms upraised you went to every home throughout Bengal. O friends entrapped in Kali's clutches yearning to break free, just worship Nityananda Ram, the root of the bhakti tree. A new Agastya Muni, with great force, he drinks the sea of birth and death. How loving and compassionate is he! For all his devotees he is the best of rising moons, expanding wide the ocean full of transcendental boons, and for the many demons filling people's hearts with dread. He is the sun dispelling all the darkness that they spread. O friends entrapped in Kali's clutches yearning to break free, just worship Nityananda Ram, the root of the bhakti tree. He wandered every path in Bengal, chanting Hari Bol, his dancing and his singing bringing joy to every soul. He put aside his own concerns to spread the holy name, thus mercifully fulfilling Sri Chaitanya's preaching aim. On seeing saintly devotees, he felt great happiness, and with his mercy-laden glance, he filled their hearts with bliss. O friends entrapped in Kali's clutches yearning to break free, just worship Nityananda Ram, the root of the bhakti tree. He gently took his brother's soft and graceful lotus hand, and as he looked upon his face, he felt his bliss expand. Chaitanya felt the same way as he looked upon the face of Nityananda, and he held him in a firm embrace. And then they started dancing through the streets of all the towns, their beauty filling every heart with joy that knew no bounds. O friends entrapped in Kali's clutches, yearning to break free, just worship Nityananda Ram, the root of the bhakti tree. And that was 8 verses. Now the 9th verse. This is the Palashruti, what you get from hearing and singing. For Nityananda's devotees who relish mellow sweet, this poem is a precious nectar reservoir replete with endless waves and whirlpools of the sweetest, deepest love, beyond what even gods and goddesses are dreaming of. It has the power to deliver any fallen soul and place him at Sri Nityananda's feet, our final goal. May those who read these transcendental verses I impart forever see his lovely lotus feet within their heart. Our friends entrapped in Kali's clutches, yearning to break free, just worship Nityananda Ram, the root of the bhakti tree. Hare Krishna, VrindavanaDasaThakura ki jai. And now, we read the srimadbhagavatam. Narayana namaskritya narang chaiva narottamam devim sadaswatim vyasam tato jayamudiriye. Before reciting the Srimad Bhagavatam, which is our very means of conquest, we should offer our respectful obeisances unto Lord Narayan, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, unto Narayan Rishi, the supermost human being, unto Mother Saraswati, the goddess of learning, unto Srila Vyasadeva, the author, and unto Srila Prabhupada, the translator, commentator, and our spiritual master. Nashta prayesha badreshu nityam bhagavat seveya Bhagavatyuttama shloke bhakti bhavati naishtiki. By attending Srimad Bhagavatam class, how's it go? By regularly attending Srimad Bhagavatam class and by rendering devotional service unto the pure devotee, all that is inauspicious within the heart is destroyed almost to nil. And loving devotion to the Supreme Lord who is glorified in transcendental songs is established as an irrevocable fact. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, 4th Canto, the creation of the 4th order, 24th chapter, chanting the song sung by Lord Shiva. Text 26. Satan papannati haro Bhagavan dharma vatsalaha Dharma Gyan Shila Sampannan Pritak Pritanubachaha Satan Papannati Haro Bhagavan Dharma Vatsalaha Dharma Gyan Shila Sampannan Pritak Pritanubachaha Satan Papannati Haro Bhagavan Dharma Vatsalaha Dharma Gyan Shila Sampannan Pritak Pritanubachaha Satan Papannati Haro Bhagavan Dharma Vatsalaha Dharma Gyan Shila Sampannan Pritak Pritanubachaha Satan Papannati Haro Bhagavan Dharma Vatsalaha Dharma Gyan Shila Sampannan Pritak Pritanubachaha. Janard? No? Satan Papannati Haro Bhagavan Dharma Vatsalaha Dharma Gyan Shila Sampannan Pritak Pritanubachaha Satan Papannati Haro Bhagavan Dharma Vatsalaha Dharma Gyan Shila Sampannan Pritak Pritanubachaha. Satan Papannati Haro Bhagavan Dharma Vatsalaha Dharma Gyan Shila Sampannan Pritak Pritanubachaha Satan Papannati Haro Bhagavan Dharma Vatsalaha Dharma Gyan Shila Sampannan Pritak Pritanubachaha. Saha, Lord Shiva, Tan, them, Papanna Artihara, one who drives away all kinds of dangers. Bhagavan, the Lord, this is Lord Shiva. Dharma Vatsalaha, very much fond of religious principles. Dharma Gyan, persons who are aware of religious principles. Shila Sampannan, very well behaved. Pritaha, being pleased. Pritan, a very gentle behavior. Uvacha, talked with them. Ha, in the past. Okay. Translation. Lord Shiva became very pleased with the Prachetas because generally Lord Shiva is the protector of pious persons and persons of gentle behavior. Being very much pleased with the princes, he began to speak as follows. Purport. The Supreme Personality of Godhead, Vishnu or Krishna, is known as Bhakta Vatsala, and herein we find Lord Shiva described as Dharma Vatsala. Of course, the word Dharma Vatsala refers to a person who lives according to religious principles. That is understood. Nonetheless, these two words have additional significance. Sometimes Lord Shiva has to deal with persons who are in the modes of passion and ignorance. Such persons are not always very much religious and pious in their activities, but since they worship Lord Shiva for some material profit, they sometimes obey the religious principles. As soon as Lord Shiva sees that his devotees are following religious principles, he blesses them. The Prachetas, the sons of Prachina Barhi, were naturally very pious and gentle, and consequently Lord Shiva was immediately pleased with them. Lord Shiva could understand that the princes were sons of Vaishnavas, And as such, Lord Shiva offered prayers to the Supreme Personality of Godhead as follows. Om Jnana Timirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshur Unmidatam Mena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. I was born in the darkness of ignorance, but my spiritual master Srila Prabhupada opened my eyes with the torchlight of knowledge. I offer my humble obeisances unto him and all members of Sri Parampara. So here we have this imminent speaking of the song of Lord Shiva by Lord Shiva. He's going to give them this mantra. And it's important to remember, I had one of our congregational members write to me recently about the possibility of worshipping Durga. He didn't say why, but in general, we should be very eager to give up any worship beside the worship of Krishna. As we say every morning, the 10 offenses, the second one is about thinking that the names of the demigods are equal to or independent of the name of Lord Krishna. Now, it's important to realize both of those aspects. I mean, most of us who are full-time here, we're not thinking, well, should I or should I not worship a demigod? But for our preaching efforts, it's many people, or some of the people may be attracted to worship this or that demigod, or from childhood they were worshiping this or that demigod or demigoddess. And to become a serious devotee, especially to be initiated, means to give that up. So these two aspects of this injunction, equal to or independent of, they have different significance. So the first one is that it has independent, meaning that you need to worship these different demigods to get different benefits. Some of you may have had the experience of visiting a Hindu temple, or a temple that has many different gods. I've had it several times. I've had that in Toronto, I had, and also in Columbus. No, not Columbus, no. It was in Winnipeg. And there's usually Radha Krishna, or more likely Lakshmi Narayan. But there's also Shiva for sure, and often Ganesh, and maybe Ram and Sita, So the idea is that we want to cover all the bases. We'll definitely worship Radha and Krishna for love, and but we need to worship Ganesh for the success of the business, and we better worship Shiva and not ignore him and Goddess Durga, because we never know what will happen. In other words, is the idea that it's more or less like a supermarket. You don't want to miss out on everything, so you cover all the bases. So that's the independent of. As if, if you just read the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna in several places, he very strongly speaks against worship of the other gods, right? What's that? Prabhupada always quote this verse, Kamais taista vritighyana papadyante anya devata tang tang nivamastaya prakatyani yataksvaya. That he's speaking about those who are full of knowledge. He begins with Chatur Bhajabadante Manjana Sukhadanarjana, that those who are pious, if they're in trouble, or if they want some money or something else material, or if they're just curious, or if they generally want knowledge, spiritual knowledge, and they have some idea of what they're looking for. And then he glorifies those, the final. He says the best, they're all pious, but the best of all are those who are generally in knowledge. And then he culminates with this very important verse, Bahunam Dramanamante Gyanavan Mam Papadyade Vasudevak Sarvamiti Samahatma Sadurlabha. After many, many births of cultivating this knowledge, those who are real Mahatmas and who really understand knowledge, what do? Surrender to me. They surrender to Krishna. Knowing that I am everything. In other words, knowing that I'm not only everything, but whatever, and this comes up later, whatever benedictions these gods or goddesses can give, they're actually coming from me. They're only able to give it because I allow them to give it, or I give it. So what's the point of worshiping a separate? Prabhupada gives you yeah.
Sorry to interrupt you. Prabhupada did bonify the worship of Ganesh in order to remove the obstacles of one's spirit.
Yes, he did. That's in the Nectar of Devotion. But he didn't really institute it in his institution. But it's there in the Nectar of Devotion, so he put it in. Yes, that's there. Just as the gopis worship Katyayani to get Krishna as a husband, there's that. But this is directly from Bhagavad Gita, where Krishna is saying that those who are kamais taiste rita jnana, those whose knowledge, as opposed to these Mahatmas, he calls them Mahatmas, genuine Mahatmas, very rare, who are full of knowledge, they understand everything and they surrender it to me. There are others whose knowledge is stolen away by various desires, Rita Jnana, Papadnyante Anya Devata. They surrender to them. In other words, it's more than just worship for one thing, it's the surrendering. Anya Devata. And they're controlled by their own natures, with different combinations of the modes of nature. Just like he's speaking about these worshippers of Shiva for material gain. A lot of them Bhutas and Pretas and low class, ganja smokers. Not so much in America, but in India. And they worship Shiva because he's asutosh. He can easily be propitiated and you get what you want. So, but Krishna condemns. He says, then he has a very interesting line of argument. He says, okay, they're controlled and they worship me. So, yo yam yam tano bhakta. No, it says, yang yam vapis, what is it? Yeah, yo yam tano bhakta shradayajita michati. Tasita sachalam shradam tamavavadadhamyanam. So the first thing you need for any kind of worship is faith. Right? That's why faith is so important in our own sadhana. The deepening one's faith in Krishna is the foundation upon which advancement is built. And it's even a measure of advancement. So here, the faith builds. You want to worship a certain God for a certain thing. You're fixed on that. And so Krishna makes your faith strong. He gives you the faith. You want to worship in this way? Because he's seeing this is your desire. I make it achala. In other words, steady faith. It can be whatever you worship in. You remember when we were in Miami, we'd hear people coming from Brazil, and they would recount sometimes the ghost worship. You hear about it. You go out in the forest. You smoke cigars. You offer liquor. There's all kinds of things. Worshipping tree spirits and whatever. If you really, it's a culture, right? Your parents did it. Your grandparents did it. And you're going to do it. And then your faith becomes strong. Yes, you get some. So this is exactly what Krishna's describing. Whatever. He says whatever you want to worship. Yo yam yam tanum bhakta. You want to be a bhakta of this form, then you can have it. So then he says, God, the next verse. So then whatever you get from that worship, it's actually coming from me. But, then the key verse, Antavatu palam tesham tadbhavaltyalpamedasam. Those who worship these gods and goddesses, not even the official one, but anything, they're not very intelligent. Alpamedasam. And whatever they get, antavat, the benefit is material and it's temporary. And then he closes with a little quote from the ninth chapter. Antavatu palam tadbhavaltyalpamedasam devan devi ajoyanti madbhakta yanti mamapi. Whatever Devi you worship, you go to that Deva. But those who worship me come to me. So that strong distinction, because all these Devas, they're living entities, except for Shiva, he's special. But you go to that Deva, but they have a certain planet and it's ultimately material. In the 9th chapter, he expands on that. And he says, yes, there are certain devotees who worship me indirectly. They drink the somaras. And if they do everything right, they go to Indraloka. Tetam bhukva swargalokam vishalam chine punye matya lokam vishanti. And in that Indraloka, they enjoy godly delights for a long time. But when their piety is exhausted, they fall down again to this world of death, matya loka. So they just go and come. What's the ultimate? It's just a big distraction. All of these benefits, all of these destinations, and the whole thing is a big distraction, especially in the Kali Yuga when time is so short. We don't live long enough to really, to do all these complicated things. So he condemns it. So Shiva, now Lord Shiva, of course, as has been explained, he has a special tattva. There's a special Shiva tattva. He's not a living entity, but he's also not Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, although in this particular verse he's called Bhagavan. We should know that the word Bhagavan is sometimes given to great lords like Brahma and Shiva, because they're so exalted. But the original Bhagavan, of course, is Krishna, full in 6 opulences. So Shiva is very happy to see these prachetas. You get the feeling, because mostly he's, his company is Bhutas and Pretas hanging out with him. But they're his devotees, as we heard earlier in the 4th canto. You remember with Daksha, when Shiva became angry because Sati, self-immolated. She was so disgusted with her father, who was insulting her husband, that she said, "I don't want this relationship anymore," and she self-immolated. Just as Bhadravinaram would say, a side note, this self-immolation, of burning yourself up with a fire generated from within, I'm not making this up. There are instances of this happening even today, by accident. Have you ever heard of that? Yeah. It's almost like it's a thing with the prana, right? The yogis can do that, and so Sati was very skilled in that. She was able to do it. But it seems like that combination of breaths and whatever causes that is almost like you win the obverse of the lottery. It's 100 million to 1, but it does happen. I mean, I remember I was living here when I first came over on Reed. And there was this book of like far out stuff, beyond the realm of what science would ordinary, One of the things I remember from that book, these Christian monks and nuns, they sometimes perform severe austerities, and they're praying, and they develop sometimes involuntary mystic powers. I remember there was one monk who would he's in the church, and he would fly up into the gallery. His body would just lift. And I think it was Teresa, Saint Teresa, the famous lady who was in Spain, who involuntarily would lift up. She didn't want it, but she would elevate in her cell or whatever it was described. So this also happens. There was some lady living in one of these trailer parks, and they came into the trailer, and there was just a pile of ashes. And the amazing thing about it, nothing else was burned. Right? You've heard of that. So internal combustion. I thought that was for the cars. We call it involuntary. What is it? Spontaneous. That's right, yeah. So that happened to Shiva and to Sati, and then Shiva became super angry, right? And did he create that Virabhadra? I think with the hair, He himself wasn't going to go it. But all of his agents, they, destroyed Daksha's sacrificial arena. Grabbing my voice. And what happened to Daksha? Who remembers? Yeah, who? Who cut his head off? No, Virabhadra. Yeah. They cut his head off, but was it right then? I think they gave him. I may not be able to complete this. He got a goat's head, and he had to live with that. He was fully chastised by that. So Shiva is consorting with these people who are more or less in the mode of ignorance sometimes, and they're not really devotees of Krishna. So he's very happy to see these prachetas. They're clean cut. You can immediately recognize behavior is very nice. I'd like to just focus on this word shila. Now shila means behavior. Shila sampannam, very well behaved. Shila is a noun. Shila is a stone. It's a whole different word. So when we mean we mean the stone, we should say Shila. We definitely shouldn't say Sheila, long I. If you're gonna mispronounce it, at least say Sheila, but not Sheila, because then you're talking about behavior. I'm going to get too into this pronunciation. Because I always remember that pastime of Twashta. You remember Twashta, the father of Vishwarup? So he became very angry when Indra cut off the heads of his son. Indra tends to fly off the handle. He saw that Vishwarup was offering some oblations to the demons because on his mother's side he had some connection to them. But Twashta had agreed to the demigods getting him as a substitute guru because Brahaspati had been offended and he wasn't around. And without a guru they had no strength, and the demons were threatening them. Well, they already had taken over. So Twashta became infuriated. He was a great Brahmin, and so was Vishwarup. So he decided to perform a sacrifice. I'm going to invoke a demon who will kill Indra. But because he was so upset, he mispronounced one word. Instead of getting a demon who would kill Indra, he got a devotee dressed as a demon whom Indra would kill and send back to Godhead. And that was Vishwa, what is his name? Vishwa, what was that big demon who would swallow the whole universe? Vitrasura. Thank you. Vitrasura. So you can see the hazard of mispronouncing. Now, of course, Bhava Grahi Janardhan. You know what this phrase means? Janardhan, you should know what it means. Bhava Grahi Janardhana. Well, it's got your name in it, so learn it today. Yes, but Vijay, did you know that that's the last line of a verse? No, but it involves mispronunciation, and I forgot the Sanskrit. But what it says is that the fool, he says Vishnaya, but the learned man, he says Vishnave. Now the general vocative is Aya, just as we say Namaste, Nama Om Vishnu Padaya, Krishna Preshtaya Bhutale. We're saying unto you, Srila Prabhupada, who have these qualities, you're dear to Krishna, like that. And so one might say, well, okay, Vishnu, Vishnaya. But no, it's an exception. In that case, it's Vishnave. So the Brahman, the learned man, he says Vishnave. But both get the same result, the pious result, because Bhava Gradi Janardana. Janardana is looking for the feeling. He's looking for the intent. And so that's it's not so a serious thing to mispronounce. But if we know the right pronunciation, it helps us to remember the meaning. This is the idea. If you know what a shila is, and you know what shila is, then you won't likely mispronounce. But if you're consistently mispronouncing day after day, year after year, especially all the prayers that we say, then there's a good chance that the Sanskrit or Bengali is just flowing by. So it helps to really enter into the meaning of these songs that we sing when you take the trouble to study. That's why I took the trouble to put the synonyms in the songbook, so that you could actually learn the songs and learn the verses and become more absorbed. So, Bhakta Vatsala and Dharma Vatsala. Dharma Vatsala means someone... now, is that describing very much fond of religious principles? So that means that the Prachetas were clearly dharmic, they were devotees. As Prabhupada says, they were sons of devotees, which means that, of course, that Prachanabhari's wife was also a Vaishnavi. And therefore, this was going to be a different experience. He wasn't going to bestow some kind of material benediction, like with classic Vitrasra, or Vikasra, excuse me. But he was going to give him the highest thing. This song, which is all a bhakti song, what we call the song of Lord Shiva, is like 30 or so verses long, and it's all he's first describing the Chatuvyuha, and then finally he himself prays near the end to please see the lotus feet of the Lord, the supreme Guru, And it's clear, I think the next verse, is or next couple of verses, you have this verse where Shiva says, I'm really pleased when I encounter Vaishnavas. You know, that's when Vaishnavas approach me, rather than all this material prayer that he usually gets. So we don't need to worship Shiva separately. We appreciate him as the supreme Vaishnava, Vaishnavana Yadha Shambhu, just as the Ganges is the best of rivers, etc., then Shiva is the best of Vaishnavas. But we don't need to propitiate him, you know. He's happy, much happier to see us engaging in the kirtan. And Prabhupada would sometimes see they come, if the kirtan is really ecstatic, you know, Narada Muni comes and so forth. At least when Prabhupada was on the planet, they would come. So that's the way to please all the demigods, is to worship Krishna. And we can all chant that verse about watering the root. Those who know it, you should know it. Yata taro mulana shecharena chipyanti tatskanda bujo prashaka pranopahara chayatendriyanam tataiva sarvahana machyuteja. This is about how the demigods are all pleased just when you worship Vishnu, and you don't have to worship them separately. Just as when you feed the stomach, then all of the limbs become nourished, or when you water the root of a tree, all the branches and the twigs become nourished. Similarly, when you worship Krishna, all the demigods and demigoddesses become pleased, and you don't have to worship them separately. Okay, let me read this translation again. Lord Shiva became very pleased with the Prachetas, because generally Lord Shiva is the protector of pious persons and persons of gentle behavior. Being very much pleased with the princes, he began to speak as follows. Any comments or questions? Oh, Jamal.
It's just a small technicality question. But you're discussing the mispronunciation. You mentioned the verse, the learned Brahmin pronounced the Vishnu. What is
yes.
it? Oh, Vishnaya. Yeah. But you mentioned that it's in the vocative form, but the Hare Krishna mantra is also in the vocative form. So how come we don't pronounce it Krishnaya or?
Well, one thing about the Hare Krishna mantra, it's not really a sentence, you know, and in names, when you get oftentimes, well, in the case of the mantra, you just you also say Hare, you know, that's another. I don't know Sanskrit that well. I know that is often seen in prayers, this Aya form. And maybe it has to do with the fact that you're actually asking something. I'll have to get back to you on that. If you're interested, you know, there's ways of learning online and everything, all this stuff. Ed Butler. Oh, there it is.
So, of course, it was briefly mentioned. I'm just wondering, I don't know, it's been some time, maybe somebody knows, but what does Prabhupada say about worshiping Ganesh in the nectar devotion, and how do we understand that? Because it is a nectar devotion, and he does say whatever he says. I remember vaguely, but it's very briefly what he said.
It's one of the 64. I think it's one of the 64.
And how do we understand that? And also you know, are there any cases? Because it seems that there would be cases in which, you know, Prabhupada's disciples would read that and say, "Oh, Prabhupada, let's, you know, here we go, let's go for it," you know. And
as far as I know, it was never asked directly of him. We can search the database. It was? Okay, so Vijay remembers. He has it. Reference. I mean, we're supposed to get Ganesh up here.
There was a devotee that wanted to worship Ganesh and make a lot of Lakshmi. And Prabhupada wrote back and said, "Very good. You have to send me $100,000 a week."
So in other words, he said no.
Yeah.
But that's another.
Like that may not be the exact amount, but something like that. You know, something extraordinary. You know?
That's a little bit different than what he's asking. The point is that it's there in the Shastra, it's there in the Nectar of Devotion. is there any case where Prabhupada authorized us to worship him for, devotional purposes? Just like we worship Lord Nrsingadev, not only for protection of, I remember when the Lord Nrsingadev worship, I think it was when it first started, there was this big attack in New Vrindavan. I don't know if you remember that. It was shortly after I joined, I think 73. And, devotees were injured. Sadhaputta was shot. They came with rifles. I think, yeah, he was there in the temple room. No, maybe he wasn't shot, but he was there in the temple room. Another devotee was injured. Nobody was killed, thank God. But what had happened is that they had a traveling party of brahmacharis collecting or something, and they went to, I think, somewhere in North Carolina or something. And one of the brahmacharis had a liaison with some young girl, and it was I think that, or maybe she had joined also. She had joined. Anyway, so the guy, her brother, I think it was her brother, not her father, maybe it was her father, was furious. They were part of a biker group, father, yeah. And so he comes looking for her with a big gang. He rides up on the motorcycles in the middle of Bhagavatam class, or maybe right after Bhagavatam class. And, somebody came running into the temple. These guys with guns are all coming. Nobody had any time to do anything. So they go into the temple room, and they have these guns, and everyone said, and it's the time of the, I think the Nrsinga prayers had just ended, but the curtains, the curtains were open, and they were just finished. And they told them to stop singing, and some ladies or somebody was still in Tabakara Kamala Ballet, that was just, everyone was terrorized. So then they noticed that there's these forms on these, so they figured it out, or they worship, so they took, I think, Radharani. Well, the first they asked who's in charge, and it was Kirtananda. He stood up, so they took him out. Oh, I didn't know about that. Hare Krishna. So meanwhile, the other guys are in the temple room, and they noticed, everyone's reviewing these. So they wanted to find out where the girl was. Apparently she wasn't in the temple. And so they took Radharani and they dropped her. They told one devotee to push her. Oh, really? He pushed her over. Oh, God. And so she broke a finger or something. But it made such a cracking sound that it freaked out the guys. The leader was up with Kirtananda. And they thought, oh, what is that, And they thought that someone else was coming or whatever. And they said, let's get out of here. And so they all left. And so they regarded it as Radharani saved them, Anyway, it was a big shock to the whole movement. And it got to New York, and suddenly everyone wanted, okay, we got to have our own crew of Kshatriyas, And so they had these guys training upstairs, and doing it. But the problem is, there's very rarely really anything to do. And so they was like Banasura with all these arms and nobody to fight. So I seem to remember that's when the Nrsinga prayers maybe became integral. Anyway, that was so part of the Nrsinga prayer is for the safety of the guru and the safety of the movement. That's one of the reasons. But the whole other reason is because, and also in Mayapur, after the attack is when they got that Nrsinga. So is to also destroy the impediments in the heart of the devotee, destroy the devotional impediments. That's another reason for worshiping the Nrsingadev. So that's why, it's very popular within Gaudiya Vaishnava.
I heard from somebody that in the Brahma Samhita, I don't know, I have to look it up, but that it says that people worshiping Ganesh, but Ganesh is getting his power from Lord Nrsingadev.
So maybe that's in the commentary. Because there's this one verse about Ganesh in there.
Well, in Nectar Devotion it says worship Ganapati because he worships Lord Nrsingadev.
Oh, really? In the Nectar Devotion?
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Anyway, the point is that, what did Prabhupada actually do? What did he set up? Just like there's a whole, thing about, the time for breaking Ekadashi fast. Now, we never worried about it, But after the 8th canto came out with Ambarish, I think, or 9th canto, and the whole thing keyed on him breaking within that time period. And Durvasa's whole idea was that he would force him to break it afterward or before, either offend Hari by not breaking it in time, or offend Durvasa by breaking it and disrespecting his guest by eating before his guest. That was the thing. So I'd have to look in the purports to see if Prabhupada emphasized that, but it was obviously a key thing there, you know. So it was after that, and with the advent of computers where you could calculate in every place, you know, what the exact time was. Otherwise it's impossible because you have a worldwide movement, but you're going to just use the Mayapur time and it doesn't make any sense. So that's one thing. And then the other was the Chaturmasya fasts. You know, now here you have a situation where in the CC, Prabhupada emphasized, it has to be done. But the fact is he never did it. I mean, that's what we learned. He never did it.
Devotees never did it, right?
No, devotees did do it. I mean, we used to do it religiously.
73?
Yeah, and even here for a while, I remember when I came here in the early 90s, you know, each temple was doing its own thing. Some temples, or some probably whole areas never did. And he, according to his servants, he never observed it himself. So he said, well, okay. You know, the same thing with the Ekadashi fast on the appearance days, right? Prabhupada says for Gaur Purnima, if you're in Mayapur, this is what you do. You know, on the day you just can break with the Ekadashi stuff, and then the next day you have a big feast. You know, so there they do it very strictly. But in Hawaii, Prabhupada was there, and he was there, Gaur Purnima or wherever, and then major feast. Because one of the things is you have so many outsiders come who you want to have as opulent a feast as possible, you know, which includes samosas and rice and everything, you know. So there's all of the, you know, there's this tension between what he did, what he said, and like that, and that's, I put this Ganesh worship in that category. It can be, you know, it's there in the Nectar Devotion, it's bona fide, but Prabhupada never did it himself. I don't think he forbade it, you know, if it's done according to the rules and regulations of the Nectar Devotion. But I haven't found one temple where they actually do it regularly, seriously, you know. Yeah, yes. Hare Krishna. All glory to Srila Prabhupada.